Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, living streams, and other people who aren't living streams who are hanging with us today. Welcome to our deep dive podcast, where we dive a little bit deeper in the things that we talk about on Sundays. Today's just another Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Just another day.
Yep.
Nothing big going on in the country or anything like that. It's Tuesday today, Election Tuesday. And,
Tuesday.
You're probably not listening on Tuesday because we're not posting it on Tuesday, but maybe Wednesday or after. So I have no idea what you're thinking about the world right now.
Yeah.
We were just before we hit record, I was saying, what?
They know a lot more than we know.
A lot more, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or maybe they don't.
Yeah. Not saying they know who won.
If prior
they at least
election
know more than we do, though.
That's true. They have a more educated guess maybe on who won. Or maybe Matt, wouldn't it be nice if we all went to bed knowing who the president was going to be? Yeah, history is...
I was on my honeymoon. George W. Bush, election night. And we were in Hawaii, which is later.
Yeah.
And we didn't know when we went to bed.
Yeah. 2020...
Way back then.
I remember by this time of the year, 2020, right, I was so sick of needing to be on my phone all the time because, like, there was things I needed to know, like whether or not I need to leave because we were, out of the country. Like, do I need to leave the country? Do I, am I okay? Like, do I have permission to stay in the country? Is it safe? Is it whatever? Is my family okay? Is there a right? All this stuff. I was so sick of like needing to be glued to my phone. I remember saying to myself, like, soon as this election is done, I'm pretty much done with my phone. As soon as I find out who the president is, like, I'm putting this thing down for good.
Your
more or
Bali
less.
phone.
Yeah. Well, yeah, my phone.
You were thinking long term.
Well, yeah, I mean, not like forever.
Oh.
I just meant like I'm going to be done with my social media. Like I'm getting rid of it. I'm shutting it off. Like I'm done with like the routines of checking the news and social media multiple times a day that I was doing because at some point it was actually vital, right? And then we just had one thing after another, right? So I was like, as soon as I know who the president is, I'm done. I'm so looking forward to going to bed, waking up in the morning and finding out who the president is and just like washing my hands of this phone nonsense. And then I was like,
work out very good.
And then I didn't know, and I didn't know, and I still didn't know, and I still didn't know.
Yeah. And
oh man, it just wouldn't let go. I'm hoping that doesn't happen again this year. I'm hoping we have something definitive before too long. But so David, you were telling me something pretty significant today, pretty important. I heard you have a secret you need to share with the world in regards to how one can lunch.
Yeah,
reasonable.
We were joking that, the most important thing that happened today, one of the most important things on this Tuesday was I found out that the $4 Chipotle bowl hack is true. Yeah. I saw it on Instagram that you can actually go into the app and order a certain specific way, and it comes out to where basically you have a full chicken burrito for $4.24.
David, you got to share the love. You got to tell us how this is done. You can't
it's complicated, but yeah, on the app you order a chicken taco, which is like $3 and something. You add a 50-cent burrito tortilla, full-size tortilla, and then you just start adding the sides that you want, and then they put it all together, and then you get it, you pick it up. And then you just put all those sides together, roll it up in the big burrito, bam, there you go. And it really did work. I was sitting next to Dalton, my burrito, same size as his burrito. Dalton did say he didn't get quite as much chicken. I didn't get quite as much chicken as him, but I could live with that for $4.24.
As a former Chipotle employee, Dalton, how do you feel about the hack?
No, it's fine. I mean, like, I see, like, when people order the tacos at Chipotle, it's always a waste of money, right? Because you're getting, they can only contain the amount, like, they're supposed to put 4 ounces of meat in, like, the 3 tacos. But, like, I don't think it ever equates really to like what you would get in any other bowl or burrito. So the way David did it, well, I get it. Like you get all the sides and everything. So like there's a point system to Chipotle. Like if something doesn't equate to like a bowl or a burrito, it's like a 3-pointer. So it reduces the cost. So you did get a burrito about as big as a regular burrito, but I will say the meat was a little slim. Yeah. So you weren't getting your 4 your 4 full ounces.
Men, we're trying to watch the amount of meat that we're taking in and intake.
But your burrito was as big as mine. It just was so beans satisfying. And rice, which is fine. That's great.
In these days of inflation and increase all the time, a $4.24. When we think about my wife and I could go there, get that big burritos, and we'd be under $10.
Or you can just make it at home. $5 foot long. They just started doing $7 foot long, which is better than like the $12 foot long they were doing until recently.
Oh, really? They're down to $7?
They're rolling out the $7 foot long now.
But what was the most important thing that happened to you today, Dalton?
I've been trying to spend less time on my phone, and then Pokemon, the trading card game, released an app so you can play the trading card game on your phone, like battle and like collect cards and open packs.
Oh my goodness!
And I pulled less than 1% chance of pulling this card. Man. But I have myself here. You can't really see it on the camera. A Mewtwo EX full art holographic. No, people know what that is, David. You just
Nino,
don't know.
You know what that is?
Do you know what this is?
No.
Nino has no idea. This is. I'm not even a 1%er. I'm a less than 0.5%er with this card right here. So
by the way, hello Nino.
That's the most important thing that happened. Nino and I were officially introduced today.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing that happened
Brother
today.
Nino, you want to say something?
Pleasure's all yours.
Yeah. Nino's helping out around here on the AV stuff. And it was great to have his
We've been trying to make this happen for probably 3 weeks. You were sick, and then I think, the way we record podcasts is we're very thoughtful and planned out. We totally don't plan it the week of. We do. It's like, want to record today at 2? And it's like, sure. So then we'll hop in and record. So coordinating with Nino has been quite the chore, but we got it. You're here, and we like having you here.
Our podcast has been missing like some solid mustache. So
I forgot.
It's good having Nino here.
Dude, mustache right here.
Represent.
Well, so this is kind of interesting because like today what we're feeling is, what are your election thoughts today? What are the things that you're trying to, guide yourself with? What are the things that you hope to see happen for the church? Like how does the church respond? And then even, maybe even what are your hopes for our political leaders in this process that we're in. But it's weird because what we're feeling today is not what's going to meet the moment that people are listening to this in 2 days or 3 days. Sort of. Yeah. But is there anything today that you kind of like think something you've read or seen that was helpful or?
Well, yeah. I mean, to your point, right? Like if you're listening to this, it's too late for me to say, hey, make sure you listen to the Holy Spirit and vote the way the Lord is leading you to, not necessarily just by what makes sense to you. Sorry if you didn't do that. Now you feel guilty because you did something different. But I think, tomorrow, we'll either know or we won't know.
Yeah.
And we're going to have feelings.
What do you want to see the church do this week in response or in the process of all this?
I think peace. I think for the church to find real peace, and we've been working on it. I think we got so smashed by anxiety and fear and the machine of politics and the world and everything 4 years ago that I feel like a lot of us have been spending 4 years trying to make sure that we're a little more rooted in the reality of the kingdom of heaven. And I feel that. I sense that. I sense less, not that there's no anxiety, but I sense less anxiety in the church than we did last.
So let me throw a couple questions out to you real quick, and I'll answer them too. But this might be fun for the people listening because they're a few days ahead of us. Yeah. So what we're saying could either be prophetic or not. Right. We could be telling the future or not. But who do you think will win? have a sense?
I
You think it'll be really close?
It's really hard to say if it'll be close. I think Trump will probably win.
You think Trump will probably win and it will be really close?
I don't think it's going to be a landslide.
But you don't think it'll be as close as...
I won't be shocked if she wins.
What is happening right now?
But
yes,
well, Kamala.
all of that.
But I think he'll win.
Do you think there will be chaos ensuing in the streets? Some streets?
I've spent
Portland?
so little. I've spent so little time on social media. I feel like I'm a little disconnected from.
That's fine.
The angst.
Okay, so you don't think?
But I think people are going to be really upset. I think there's going to be people throwing a political hissy fit.
Yeah,
when you say some streets, so somebody's going to get upset one way.
Either way,
something unpleasant is fairly likely to happen somewhere in the country, no matter who wins, I would say.
Well, here's what I've been praying for all day today, and we'll know if it's true maybe by the time people are listening to this, but I've been praying that both, Mrs. Harris, Mr. Trump will respond to whether they win or lose in a way that actually releases some grace and blessing into our nation. That's what I've been praying.
Yeah.
That if Trump wins or if he loses, that either way there will be some sort of humility and generosity extended that will kind of release just some goodness in our nation. Yeah. And if Harris wins or loses, same thing, that there'll be that, and that both of them will do it. Both of them will come through, whether they want to or not or acknowledge it, but it really would be something that's actually honoring to God. That's what I'm praying for.
It's sad that feels like a big prayer.
Right. I think they obviously, the hand of the Lord is to some extent upon them to kind of lead them both to these moments, to these places. And it's so that they can do the right thing, do something beautiful and all of that. So that's what I'm praying for. I'm really, really hoping and praying for. And then the governors and all that will follow suit. Now, I'm sure there'll be some people doing chaos, but I just think they have such an opportunity to do something, especially the one that loses. Could be really, really cool. And
it'd be a little redemptive because it used to be kind of par for the course.
Yeah. I remember John McCain's concession speech when he lost to Obama. It was really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
What he was offering in that, like or not, like McCain or not, whatever. Just that, I remember that moment listening to that concession speech, just going, wow, this was a lot of grace. This was a lot of humility and generosity. So that's what I'm praying. And not just, and obviously if them do it, but the people of God would do that.
Yeah.
Whether they win or lose based on who they voted for, that there would just be a lot of humility and generosity extended to the people who voted for somebody else.
Yeah.
And that way we'll get to increase our salt and light instead of decrease it.
Yeah. And
that's where my prayers have been today.
It's maybe a useful thing to hear the today that you guys are listening, but not the today that we're recording, right? Is that God's will is not on the ballot as though it were undetermined. Yes, we have free choice. Yes, there is a difference. Yes, there is something valuable to us voting. Of course, that's the stuff that maybe today would be like the today that David and I are in talking is worth hearing. But tomorrow, when you guys are listening, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whenever, if we're wondering what the results are, or if we've gotten the results, whether we like them or not, it's worth saying, like, it's not a choice between, like this is not going to determine, the outcome of this election does not determine whether or not God is sovereign and whether or not he's in control of.
Well, I think that's
nation.
The big question. I always think about it when someone wins the Super Bowl and they want to give glory to God. They're like, I just thank God for, helping us win. I was like, well, how involved is God in actually you winning and the other person losing?
Yeah.
And I've heard, some people say, I'm just so thankful that God has given me an opportunity to be in this place where I can give him glory. Like that makes a lot more sense. But how involved in the U.S. election? Remember, there's a whole world out there that's not U.S. So we got to make sure we don't become a little too like blind to that reality. But God does care, I think, and God is involved. The scriptures say that he raises up and he puts down, leaders. So he's somewhat involved in the process, but at the same time, like there's way more important things. So it's not like this is the only thing or the biggest thing that God's involved in. So, but to what degree is he involved, and what degree is he not? I mean, those are interesting questions. Some deep thoughts for sure.
I read on your recommendation. I read through last week, Jesus and the Powers. Yeah, N.T. Wright, and what's the other guy? Michael Bird.
Michael
Bird. And they handled some of those questions, like that question, pretty well. And they talked at one point about Assyria, and I think that's a really apt comparison. And they're talking about how the fact that there's something about being a Christian that I forget, they phrase it so well, but that leads us to a conclusion that like a democracy is a pretty dang good thing and something we should be behind. But God has been in and endorsed and worked through all sorts of other governments. God has brought about his will in democracies and dictatorships and all these sorts of things. And somewhere in that discussion, they're pointing to Assyria, right? Like God ordained Assyria to be in power and then punished them for what they did with that power and how they brought about the things that he charged them with.
Brutal stuff, and then God punished them, yeah.
And so that's, I mean,
Well, here's the deal. God is not trying to make America great again.
Yeah.
Right? His goal is not to make America great.
Yeah.
His goal is to establish his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Mm-hmm. And so to some extent, we trust that God ordains or allows certain leaders and certain power to be in a certain person's hands for a season because God sees fit that this will bring about the greatest increase of his kingdom.
Yeah.
And his kingdom isn't rising and falling based on America's prosperity or not.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the one thing we know is whoever becomes president in a few days, that God is allowing this so that his kingdom can advance in the best way possible, whether that is like helpful for believers or even in opposition to believers, like what happened in Rome, where the kingdom of God, the people of God grew so quickly and so boldly in the face of great persecution and opposition in very ungodly leadership. Somehow that light was able to shine brighter in that darkness. Mm-hmm. But then for whatever God sees fit to allow there to be leadership and power that actually does help extend the light and brighten the light. But, so God's involved for sure. We could trust that.
You're making me think of something which I would not endorse all the things that this guy says, and not all of it certainly is exegesis, but nonetheless is worth listening to sometimes. But one of the things that Jordan Peterson says every once in a while is, I think in particular, I'm going to shoot from the hip and quote him here, but talking in particular about the workplace and all that. And he's saying something to the effect of when someone else is dropping the ball, that actually creates a huge opportunity for you. Because if you pick up the slack and are seen as someone who's really helping out, that ends up being promotion for you. So you can be frustrated with a coworker who's not doing their job well, or you can choose to take that opportunity to serve well, to help them, to help your boss, help the team, help the company, and end up being the one who saves the day and gets seen as doing
everything's
that
an opportunity.
And in the same way, or in a similar way, I should say, when the world is really messed up, it's a huge opportunity for the church. The early church, one of the handful of really key things that early church historians were looking at, the earliest church, right, and saying that was a big deal, and we recognize this at this point in time too, was the way in the Roman world it was a common practice if the patriarch of the family didn't like this baby for one reason or another, whether there was a deformity or just didn't want him or whatever, they would just they would expose the child, is what they'd go take him to a hill and just leave the baby out on the hill to die. And the early church was aware of that practice, grew up with that practice, and then came to know Jesus and said, we got to go get these babies.
Yeah. And
they'd go to those hills, they'd pick up those babies, they'd take care of them, they'd raise them, and they'd care for the sick and the dying, whether they were pagans or Christians, and but the pagan world would ignore the sick and the dying, and this created a huge opportunity for the church to grow. It was one of the things that was not strategic. It was just response to the kingdom of heaven in the church. And it caused the church to grow significantly. And so if you're maybe one of the people, who was really hoping for, for a more pro-life response in the last few years, and you're disheartened because maybe the ballots turn out, and maybe in Arizona, we have a significant boom of abortion rights that's on the ballot, or continuing with some restrictions. Maybe I don't know where that goes. It seems like the tide is maybe pro-abortion. And so if that passes, that's tragic. That grieves the Holy Spirit. And at the same time, it creates an opportunity for people to engage in ministries like Crisis Pregnancy Center, who are just
Choices.
saying, Choices.
Yeah.
Sorry, it used to be Crisis. They changed it to Choices. Choices Pregnancy Center, for people to lean in and say, well, let's go engage society's pain. Let's meet people there. Let's love you. Let's care for you. Yeah. Let's care for these babies and these moms and these dads.
The church's response is, whoever wins, this is the opportunity that God wanted us to have to advance his kingdom, to share his gospel, because his gospel is what heals the world. Yeah. No doubt about it. So
100%.
Yeah. Well, so those are some election thoughts for sure.
So just to, keep things light and fluffy, right?
Jude.
Sunday morning.
Jude,
the Book of Jude.
Yeah,
sin is sin. David, you brought a really good and heavy word on Sunday. I was chatting with someone on Sunday afternoon. Someone was coming over and helping me at my house, and she was just saying how obvious it was how much Sunday cost you to bring a heavy message, to say, hey, it's not fun calling sin, but we got to do it.
Yeah.
And so
I was so excited about the Book of Jude. We've been talking about it for a long time.
Yep.
And it's just this little book, and it's got even a little apocalyptic type stuff in there, but it's like very practical, and it's Jesus' half brother.
Yeah.
And I was so excited about it. And then I heard your message 2 weeks ago and just thought, wow, this is awesome. And you kind of led us into, dealing with the mess was a big part of your picture. And I just thought, wow, that it just felt like Jude opened up even further after listening to your message. And again, I was excited. And then I don't know, I was not feeling well last week, and I'd just gotten back from Belize. So Monday I was actually had some free time because I wasn't coming into the office because I was sick. So I really just started diving in, and it was not very far in to Monday, Tuesday, studying Jude, where I was going to go. And I started to realize this isn't fun anymore. This is not going to be a fun message to preach. This is not going to be a fun message to hear, because, the reality that Jude is calling out sin. He's saying, I wanted to write to you, verse 3, about our common faith. Like, kind of like, hey, this is great. Isn't this wonderful? Hey guys, isn't that awesome? Yeah, everything is awesome. But he was compelled by the Spirit of God to write to them to contend for the faith. Oh, it still doesn't sound too bad. Like we talked about contending for the faith. Yeah. Of course, that's what we need to be doing right now in our day and age.
Up.
Contending for the faith sounds great. But then he says, because, and then he goes on for the next, 10 verses, even more than that, probably 14 verses, just talking about sin and how God Jesus is a judge for sin, and Jesus will destroy the sinners. And there's these people that don't call sin, they call sin okay. And he's not happy with them at all. These people, those people. He just starts, and just
malcontents,
rips
grumblers
into them. Yes. And so then it was like, okay, well, this is a message where I'm going to have to, call out sin and help people reestablish a fear of the Lord, because the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, and how it's so important for us to hate evil, to hate sin. And we have to be so careful not to be people that start to say, hey, it's okay when we're talking about sin, or even stuff in our society where people saying, hey, why are you making such a big deal of that? And us go, oh, never mind, we'll be okay with that, and kind of compromise. And you mentioned that in your message as well, just kind of alluding a little bit to that, how you started thinking about, oh, wait a second, I don't like having to be one who calls out someone else as being a false teacher. Yeah. That's not fun. But the whole New Testament is full of that. And Jude is basically begging us to do that. Yeah. To call out the false teachings and the false teachers in our day and age so that people can be saved. Yeah. So our faith can be saved, so that people can avoid this fiery judgment coming from Jesus, who is also our Savior. So yikes. Yeah. It got intense real quick.
Yeah. It's a heavy stuff. Have you felt any conviction in the Book of Jude?
I think that, I've felt pretty torn up because of the complexities of what people are dealing with, and people that I'm close to. I know that, one of the things that, fitting with our political season is how there are a lot of people who would call it campaigning, or he's just fighting for America, or she's just, trying to do what's best, but demeaning, lying, manipulating, all of these things. And yet we justify it because it's the person that we're going to vote for or whatever. Yeah. And so I feel like that's something that I've had to just continually watch myself, but also the people around me. Yeah. Just to not justify, to not, emulate that, because it's really easy to just, especially with the way that the media is going these days, to just start talking trash about the other. Yeah. But I just don't think that's at all godly in any way, shape, or form. And it's all fair in politics and war and all these, it's, if it's sin, it's sin. That's why I kept hearing Jude just going, no. Yeah. Don't let people call that okay. Yeah.
It's interesting. Did you watch the Joe Rogan Donald Trump interview?
I listened to some of it.
There was
not very much.
There was I don't think I finished it, but I watched about 2/3 of it, maybe 3/4 of it. But there was a moment in there, interesting. Joe Rogan, right? There's a reason he's the most, the biggest podcast in the world. They're interesting, good at interviewing people, good at drawing stuff out. Yeah. But here's the thing that his secret weapon is he's weirdly really honoring of people. Lots of things about his character, of course, we're not endorsing, and his thoughts. It feels like I shouldn't need to say that, but it's worth saying, right? But there was it happened a lot, but there was one really clear moment in there where I felt like actually Joe Rogan, what he did was so emulatable and so in line with the heart of Jesus in exactly the regard to what you're talking about, where they were talking a little bit about Harris and whether or not she was going to come on the Joe Rogan podcast, and Trump was saying, oh, I hope she does, because she'll just be a puddle on the floor. It'll go really badly for her. It'll be, incoherent. And Joe Rogan said, actually, I think we'd have a really good conversation. Mm-hmm. I think people want to get to know her, and I think it would be really meaningful.
That's cool.
And I saw that pretty consistently. There were a couple places where he took the bait a little bit, but obviously the whole time Donald Trump was trying to get him to throw some mud on her and to knock her down. And pretty consistently, Joe Rogan found the capacity to not, he didn't need to rebuke Trump in that and say, "Hey, stop it, dude."
Yeah.
But he also didn't take the bait, and he said, "I'm gonna actually throw in a little bit of honor towards her."
Yeah.
And I thought that's a pretty big deal.
No, I think that's
what we ought to do. I think.
Yeah,
in
our
those scenarios.
speech. Our speech. I know so many Christians that are just taking the bait in some ways and perpetrating things that are very demeaning,
hard not to,
or hard, and I mean, I think they might do it they might be careful to do it in some circles and not other circles. So there is some self-control and kind of all of that, but yeah, it's funny. There's a text thread of my family, just recently, in regards to a certain thing. We were all texting about this one thing, and then someone, then there was someone who kind of put some things that would be more on the political side in there, and then one of the other family members on there was saying, "Hey, let's wrap up this text thread," because they knew some of the people on the text thread that were in the family were not of the same opinions.
Yeah.
So it was just interesting how just in this text thread, there were all these dynamics where it was like, "Hey, I think we have to be careful, probably more careful than we're being, for the sake of these one family members that are going to, it's going to get hurt in this potentially." And so, but the communication was just in this text. It was kind of interesting how that went. And again, I mean, my family, there's no one out there trying to hurt anybody or anything like that. But yeah, I think we just have to be so careful with our words. And I feel that in Jude, where it's just, we're going to get there this Sunday, which we didn't last Sunday, but where Jude is saying that even the angel or the archangel Michael didn't basically talk any trash to Satan over when they were fighting over the body of Moses, which again is total Jude, like bizarre apocalyptic moment where he's using all these examples that we're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But he's saying even in that, even when there was an angel and the devil fighting over the body of Moses, don't look at the body of Moses right now, never mind that. The archangel Michael was careful to say, "The Lord rebuke thee," not talk any trash. Yeah. And I just think, wow, we need to be really careful with our tongues. Yeah. In this time. So that's been a constant conviction that's been coming to me. Interestingly enough, one of the other things that I said was about the immigration reality, especially in our city. It's very, close to home, where there is, illegal immigration. There is a movement of people to try and come to the U.S. illegally, and they're justifying it because, their situation is horrible where they are, or everyone else has done that, and it's impossible because of the process system of the U.S. government, all these things. So there's kind of this movement towards, well, you might as well just do it, do it illegally, and then work it out later or something like that. And again, I am not claiming to be an expert in this. I know there's so much nuance here. And yet for right now, literally in this last year, have been in seriously close relationship with about 6 people, whether they're single or married or family or whatever, who have been immigrating to the U.S., and they're trying to do it in a way that is godly, above reproach. And they have had many, 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 many opportunities to compromise on a godly way. Yeah. And I've been so unbelievably proud of and amazed by them at how they are continuing to say, okay, well, what about this? And they'll talk with a lawyer, a godly lawyer, and they'll say, no, that doesn't seem right, or this does seem right, or how does this affect even the U.S. taxpayer if I was to do it this way? Well, that seems like cheating a little bit, so I need to do it this way, even though it's going to be more challenging for me. And I mean, and it's just amazing. I mean, obviously with Living Streams Espanol and Mario Benavides and his family, we're trying to do everything above, a board because it's a religious workers visa and all of that. And the system is so frustrating, and he keeps getting caught in these challenging predicaments that it would be so much easier if he just cheated. And he actually told us when we were talking with him this, even yesterday, he said that he was only here for maybe a month or two on the religious workers visa, when through a couple things.
He said there was an app.
Yeah, there was
Ecuadorians.
this guy who approached him and said, "Hey, you're from Ecuador. I'm from Ecuador too. I can get you documentation for $200 a person for your family." And he just was so shocked at how easy it is. But it would look real, and it would get him all the things he wants to get to.
Yeah.
And especially for his own kids who haven't been able to work,
And it's been they've been so many. And it's who's gonna have to leave the country now?
And we've done everything. I mean, we've gotten lawyers. We've paid for everything. We have basically done it as best as possible.
Yeah,
and it's still been aggravating and frustrating. And they've been challenged, but they're sticking with the God. They want the gains that godliness brings more than the gains that anything else can bring. And that's kind of been my message to all of the people who are asking me, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I was like, just make sure.
Yeah.
Godliness with contentment brings much gain.
Yeah.
Let's get those gains.
Yeah.
And trust the Lord for all the other ones. But it's tricky stuff.
And you said, so I think we'll spend a good chunk of time hitting some of the nuance, because you listed off a list of things and said like, hey, this is nuance, this is surgical.
Yeah.
And you were saying, I'm not the best surgeon. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but I would say sometimes you are a pretty good surgeon. But even the best surgeons nick an artery every now and then, right?
And not just get it wrong. I mean, I was doing my best to present what I felt like was right, but I know I'm not perfect.
And one of the really hard things, and I know this from preaching similar messages, where it's like, I feel like I need to bring this up.
Yeah.
But then to bring this up is going to require another 10, 20 minutes just to do this, but that's not even the main point of the sermon. And so then sometimes you're like, I'm just not going to bring it up. So it's like, do I just not bring up the important thing because I don't have time to unpack it? Or do I bring it up and leave the dissonance in the air, knowing that actually missing,
bring that to bear.
And so you chose the latter this Sunday and said, well, I'm going to bring it up and just say, look, there's more nuance. I can't do it. But we've got this nifty little thing called a podcast where we at least can attempt to bring some nuance for those who are willing. So,
and I got next Sunday too.
Yeah, so let's hit some nuance on that. You talked about abortion stuff. You talked about
I'll talk about nuance on that, on just the immigration thing as well. It was so beautiful because a guy came up to me after one of the services, and he was, you could see visibly upset.
And the thing you said that needs nuance, which you kind of said already, but just to be clear, was you said to be in the country illegally was a sin.
I said to immigrate illegally is a sin. And basically what I was saying is we can't just call it brave.
Yeah.
Which I think there is a movement to just say, hey, if you're willing to do that, even illegally, it's brave. Yeah. So I was trying to say we got to be careful to not call something that is sinful not sin.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's going up.
Before you even hit this anecdote, this story, I want to say something that I think is helpful context too. Like, you're speaking pastorally, not politically here.
Oh, 100%.
And that's a big deal because not a lot of people spend a lot of time wearing a pastoral lens, right?
Yeah.
Politically is very different because pastorally, what I mean by that is if you were speaking politically, you would be endorsing a particular party when you make that statement.
Yeah.
And saying these policies, they're holding this, that's 0% in your mind or your heart.
Yeah.
What you're speaking pastorally is, hey, I'm speaking to someone that I am encouraging to live a life above reproach in righteousness and holiness. And so I want to make clear the things that other people have been trying to give you an excuse for.
Well, and that was the analogy that I started with the verse 1 and 2 of Jude and verse 24 and 25, that the Father is trying to keep us as this precious, spotless, innocent bride that he will hand over to Jesus, who then takes over and keeps us and is able to keep us, and present us spotless again. So this whole idea of the Father and the Son, keeping us, like we're this, and I have 3 daughters. I talked about that and how I want to do everything I can to protect their innocence and their dignity. so they can be as free and bright as they want to be. So pastorally, like almost like a father, I'm trying to share with our congregation, anybody who's listening, hey, there are some things that will steal your innocence and destroy your dignity. And I'm going to try and name those things so that it won't happen to you.
And another important distinction there in that same, on that same topic is between pastoral and political, right? Like, and I know this because I know you and I've seen this, right? If you're sitting in a room with someone who's here undocumented, your response to them is not, you're not invited, get out of here. Your response is a pastoral response, right? Which is like, hey,
how can we
help you? How can we love you? How can we care for you?
His path, yeah. Because you might be already on it, or you might need to make some adjustments to get on that path.
The political machine we have here has taught us to view things as though you're either for or against people immigrating one way or another. But the kingdom of heaven is very different. I mean, because biblically there is a ever-present call to care for the foreigner and to love the foreigner. And you do that and we do that. Yeah. And we put up refugees over and over and over again here. We care for people regularly. You do this with your own life, your own family, your own house, your own finances, your own love. But not everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And so they, I think some people could hear that, and then there's not time to unpack the nuance. They think, oh, you're just saying vote red all day, Well,
and it's funny. That's why there was another thing that I kept thinking about that we've actually discussed a little bit is third service. I was sharing these things, and at some point people started to kind of clap and cheer. And I asked everyone to stop doing that, because I was saying, it's good that I think people were they were getting excited, and because they were glad that somebody was calling out sin for sin, and there was a hunger and a thirst for righteousness is I think why they were starting to cheer. But what I was sensing in that moment was that there are some people who this was hitting really hard, and I didn't want them to be sitting there maybe in their pain or frustration or challenge, and other people are cheering and happy. I just felt like that would have made them feel just smaller or unwelcome or something like that. So that's where I kind of was like, hey, hold on. No. And I felt back because I felt like I was shushing people a little bit, where normally I'm trying to get people. Yeah, it's nice to see when the church, gets excited about something, but it was just that moment. It just felt a little too raw.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of vulnerability going on. And I didn't want there to be cheering in that moment. Yeah. And so we did that. Everyone seemed to respond fine to that.
Yeah.
But
I think you handled that really well.
But it's both those things, like you're saying. It's like we want righteousness and we want godliness, but we also want those who are unrighteous and ungodly to know they can start that journey too, no matter what they've done, no matter where they are. And so that would be the message to everyone who is undocumented worker who basically in one lens might be seen as an illegal immigrant. That's not to say Jesus doesn't love you. Jesus doesn't have a plan for you. But it is to say that from this day forward, do what you can to walk in a godly manner and let sin still be sin. And so if there is any cheating or lying or stealing that's going on, we got to stop that and allow the Lord to be the one that we trust and we grow. And so the guy that came up afterwards, it was really beautiful.
Tell us about that.
He was upset, and he just said, "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" And I was like, "Absolutely," because I just felt raw and vulnerable all day on Sunday, even after the message. It took me a long time to just feel okay. And so he wanted to share because he was feeling very raw and vulnerable. And he said, "I feel very safe here." And I thought that was beautiful. He said, I feel very safe talking to you, which I was very thankful. He said, "But I am so hurt right now." And I didn't know, because obviously, sad to say, there were multiple things that I had said that could have hurt, And so I said, which part of it was hurting? And he said it was the whole idea of the illegal immigration, as a sin. And he basically started to unpack, and we don't need to go all the details, but his parents had basically taken his family across the border and come into this country illegally. They were fleeing a situation that was not good, and they thought, well, let's at least try. In some ways, they were throwing themselves at the hands of the U.S. government, at the mercy of the U.S. government. And at this point, sitting there, they're all documented now. They're all, they have their citizenship. But what he was wrestling with was the fact that I think all of his life he's looked back at what his mom and dad did as only heroic. Mm-hmm. Like it was just this beautiful thing that they did. And now he was hearing this guy, me, saying that, it might not have been just heroic. It could have possibly been something where they were trusting in something other than God. And again, I don't know their family or he said that none of them were believers back at that point, and they're all believers now, which is awesome, believers in Jesus. So, but it was just, for him, he was like, you're saying that it's not all perfect. And I'm saying, I'm not saying anything. Like I'm not making any claims as to you and what your parents are doing, all those type of things. I'm just saying that we have to be careful, even in situations like that, to walk in a righteous way.
Yeah.
And to not manipulate or steal or cheat or anything like that, and allow the Spirit of God to guide us. And that's why I said the last verse, which is kind of the catch-all, where James says, to him who knows what to do and doesn't do it, that's sin.
Yeah.
And so in that situation, it could be that they didn't know what else to do, and they did do what they did, and it wasn't sin per se in that regard. But when we know what to do, like with Mario knows that's not the right way to become a pastor in Arizona. And if he was to do it, it would be sin.
Yeah.
So I think especially when people don't know, like there's a different standard for people who don't know Jesus. Obviously it's still sin.
Yeah.
But it's differently in the sense of knowing what you're supposed to do and then not doing that.
And I know yesterday you and I had a pretty fruitful conversation about this too, in some of that, because there is actually, sometimes people use the word nuance to just wishy-washy everything and blur and confuse. But then the world is actually a very complex world, and there isn't just a very simple rubric that God uses to judge everything by. He looks at the heart of man, and the heart of man is not rigid.
The spirit of the law.
Yeah, it's not ones and zeros. It's very complex and nuanced, right? And he looks inside, not outside. And one of the important nuances there, right, which is because what we're talking about when you say what you're saying about immigration is something that interfaces with. Well, to some extent, there's something to be said for obeying the laws that are righteous and just or neutral, like the land gets to set its laws. And if they're not contrary to the moral law of God, then it's right for us to obey them. But then the reality is sometimes the laws of a country can be complex and ambiguous and have gaps in them. So, for example,
or just straight up unjust.
Yeah. So, for example, actually, I have been in we were just talking about this one in 2020, we were in Indonesia, and there's a certain visa system, but then at some point in time, they shut down the immigration office. It was just shut down. And then people's visas, and you're supposed to renew your visa every month, which involves either paying someone a bunch of money to do it for you or going in there 3 times during the course of the month. It's very unnecessarily complex, I think, just to make it so the government can get a little more money out of all the people who are staying there, which is fine and great. Their prerogative to do. Make some money off me. Go for it, But when the immigration office shut down, it's all of a sudden, well, I can't go to the immigration office to renew my visa this month or next month or next month or next month. And the Indonesian government was not releasing like what they weren't telling people what they wanted to do until after dates were lapsing. So like lots of people had their visas lapse and are thinking, shoot, am I going to get deported? And like weeks or a month or two after that, the Indonesian government said, hey, no, you're fine for 2 more months. Don't worry about it for 2 months. Then that 2-month date came and went. And 2 weeks later, we got the announcement, oh, no, you're fine for another 3 months.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this window where it's like, I don't know if I've broken a law or not. And there is some, and in our system in the States, there are some corners like that, actually quite a few. So for example, and this got super political a little while ago because the discourse that was happening officially was a bit silly about it, but our refugee system can create, like there is, and this, got heated politically, but like, we have a process that someone can enter into the country and request asylum and then refugee status subsequent to that. And I don't know all the nuances and in and outs of that, but that does there are ways you can do that on the front end of crossing the border. And then there are ways you can do it on the back end of crossing the border. And so it creates a weird space where it's like, you kind of need to legally cross the border in order to legally request asylum in some situations. And so that is genuinely a complex situation. And so it's like, well, what does that mean? That's where it's pretty hard. And so like, I think the thing we can look at, right, and we can learn is like, well, what's in my heart? And what am I doing? Yeah. Am I trying to cheat? Am I trying to swindle? Am I trying to get in and take advantage? Or am I saying, no, like I'm just trying to follow the Lord and do this above board with all the cards that are given to me. Yeah. And I am
to
listening
him who
to
knows
the Lord.
what to do.
Yeah.
And doesn't do it. To him it is sin. Yeah.
So anyway, there's oh man.
Yeah. And I think you were asking, so the other things that we mentioned, one was the sexual reality, sexual ethic, and the complexities there. And, I think we've talked about it before, and it's something that we'll have to keep talking about, not because we want to, but because of, Coldplay and Apple, Plus TV, and all the others out there that are really, really, really putting forth a sexual ethic that's very opposition to what the Bible puts forth. Yeah. And in particular in the LGBTQ plus community.
And we love the people who are getting
transgender, all of that.
Pulled into that, and we don't want them to suffer.
And that was the one thing, any sexual activity outside the biblical covenant of marriage, one man, one woman for life, is a sin. The Bible's very clear on that, start to finish. But today there are people out there calling it freedom or something like that. You love who you love or whatever. And again, I don't even want to believe that necessarily. I just think that's a hard thing. But at the same time, am I going to trust society? Am I going to trust Coldplay? Am I going to trust, even my own heart, or am I going to trust the Spirit of God found in the Scriptures? And the Scriptures have been around and proved themselves over and over and over again. And we think we're on the cutting edge of something with this sexual revolution, but many societies have gone through this before. And that's why it's so crazy. In the Bible, you can go back thousands of years and they were writing about this specific thing. Yeah. So it's not like it's new or now we're dealing with it differently, or so it's just the same old sin. It's the same old idolatry that has shown up time and time and time again that's trying to take root in our society today. And so we had to call that out as well, which again, there's complexity, there's nuance. There's people who they have, internal desires that are very powerful and strong. And there's even people who have identity stuff or whatever. And the main thing that I was thinking, because I've walked with people in those shoes as well. Within my own family, within the church. We've got plenty of stories of people, both who have come to grips with the biblical ethic that we teach and left, and come to grips with the biblical ethic that we teach and have left the LGBT community to follow Jesus in this path and find the freedom and all those things. Yeah. Awesome. So it's cool. And we've been praying very, clearly that the Lord would continue to bring people to our community that can find the freedom in Christ from some of these other things, and be confronted with the truth that the Bible teaches, which they will not find anywhere else but the church.
Yeah.
They're not going to find this in any classrooms, any celebrities or not. Like, it's just the media is very clearly decided on what's right and what's good, and the Bible teaches the exact opposite. So we have to be bold about these things so that people can hear that.
Yeah.
And we have to do it in a loving way. But we're praying for that community. We love that community. We, like I've said, I've redirected certain parts of my life to actually go to places where I know there will be transgender people working there or hanging out there, just so I can go and get to, what's your name? Like, do you like this job, or what else do you like doing? And ultimately, hopefully saying, have you ever thought about Jesus? Like, what are your thoughts on Jesus? Would you ever come to a church? I mean, I know it's scary, but what if you could come and it not be scary? Or is there just trying to get into these relationships that hopefully could become relationships where we can talk about some of those deep things. And so we actively pursue that as people, as pastors. But at the same time, we feel like this is something the Bible calls sin. Therefore, it's going to destroy our innocence and destroy our dignity and rob us of some of the things that Jesus wants to see happen in our life. And so we want to call that sin and call people out of that into something else. And on the other hand, like, I kept thinking, well, why not pornography? Why not adultery? Why? Well, I'd say because at this point, I don't really hear anyone saying pornography is not wrong or destructive.
Yeah, well,
idolatry,
they are still, but a lot less.
But very little.
And there's
right?
even a secular voice that's hopped on board.
Yeah, and
with
adultery, I don't really hear. I mean, obviously, you can find random people that would say that's good or something like that. But I mean, people still are saying, no, that's destructive. Obviously, it destroys a marriage, it destroys a family, all these things.
Well, devil's advocate, they reframe it as open marriage now and try to pretend that's okay.
Right, but again, I'm not hearing that very often. What I am hearing is love who you love.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's actually a more brave and higher way of living. And, that's the Coldplay song is saying that, she can see colors that no one else can see.
Yeah.
Everyone else is asleep. She's the only one awake.
You're trying to
it's
speak
almost
into
like
the ones where no one's heard it or where you're not hearing it enough.
Well, no, I'm speaking to the ones that are very clearly saying something that the Bible calls sin is not sin.
Yeah.
That's what I felt like Jude was compelling me to address. So that's why I wasn't speaking about those other specific issues as much.
Yeah.
Even though, we got this Sunday to talk about a lot of other sin. There's no lack of that in the book of Jude. I'm excited about this Sunday's message, but it'll be different for sure.
Yeah, and that list could be 1,000 times longer, so easily of things that, because we tell ourselves it's not sin.
Yep.
And then we harmonize with each other.
The devil, the world, and the flesh, 3-part harmony.
Yeah. To convince us, no, it's okay. And the thing that is, and I think we've been saying this, and it's coming out of, I think, every word you're saying, but it's like, even when you're talking about, okay, I'm going to a place where I can have some interactions with people who are trans, and like, I think the skeptic, who hears you say that, who's got some bitterness towards church and believers or pastors, would hear that and say, well, you're just trying to convert them so that they agree with you, so you feel better about yourself, so one more notch in the belt. But the reality is, what's going on is, I actually have Jesus's love for you. You are not enemy, you're child of God, and I actually believe that these things are hurting you, and I want you to come out of that into life. And even if you don't, I love you. Totally.
That's the trick. I'm offering myself.
Yeah.
I'm offering the love that I have in my heart. And but that's going to be there whether or not that person decides to follow Jesus or not, or agree with me or not. No, that's and again, that's easy to say, but I've been able to prove that in many places and ways. Even when year after year there's still disagreement, the love's still there, and the offer of friendship, and And, we'll talk about in 2 weeks, we'll talk about the application of mercy in the book of Jude, which Jude's even intense about that.
Yeah.
But the different relationships that we have, there's different ways to apply mercy.
Yeah.
Sometimes mercy is just, kind of, it says, show mercy to those who doubt. So there's a gentleness in that mercy. Then there's mercy to, as rescuing someone from the fire. So it's almost like this more intense, but rescue someone. That's the most merciful thing you could do. And then there's a third application of mercy, which basically says just, cut the person out. Don't even associate with them at all. And that's a hard mercy.
Yeah.
But it still is mercy if the end goal is that this person might find Jesus and find life and all those things. But we have to be careful to not apply the ones that we want to apply to the people we want to apply.
That last one, it says show mercy with fear, right?
Yeah.
So don't
do this one unless you're supposed to do it. Yeah.
But, and so to hit what I think, there are a few more things you hit, but there's one more that requires some important nuance. And it's interesting, you brought it up and you hinted at some of the nuance, but interestingly, I actually maybe even in a good way, like some of the ambiguity and the nuance that you hinted at, or the way you presented it was nice because it felt like it kind of balanced. I think people, if they were going to mishear you on that, they would mishear you leaning left. And if they were going to mishear you on the immigration one, they would mishear you leaning right. So I thought that actually works out pretty good. In particular, it was abortion, the way you were talking about abortion.
Oh, yeah. I totally forgot about that one.
And so there's nuances there. And again, you tried to succinctly squeeze some of those in there, but succinct doesn't work so well.
I said, I think if there's an abortion happening for any of these reasons, and, pretty clearly you can look on lots of different places will all say the same thing about why a woman decides to have an abortion.
Yeah.
And, the vast majority of them are not healthcare related. They're not, the pregnant mom's health. It's, financial, it's timing, it's trouble with the spouse or the partner. It's all these other reasons. And I just said, I think we can call it whatever we want. I mean, people are calling it healthcare.
Yeah.
But if you're choosing to abort this life because it's not convenient, or you're not sure how you're going to afford it, or all these things. I mean, I just think you can't claim healthcare in those regards.
Yeah.
You're probably on the grounds of sin at that point. And again, nuance to some of that as well. But I just and the truth is I mean, we're already at a challenge if sorry about that. If someone has had sex outside the covenant of marriage, then, we're just kind of adding sin to sin in some ways. So again, we can't just now start to call it healthcare when if you back up a little ways, it's actually something that, sin is what got you into this situation. Mm-hmm. And so now what are you going to do now? And I mean, it's very tricky stuff. And obviously I'm a guy,
down the road.
But, our one of our daughters had some complications, and they made it very clear that they could make all of this go away, and we wouldn't have this challenge anymore at all.
Yeah.
And this pretty severe challenges, but no, thank you.
Yeah.
Like that we're this is a life that God has entrusted to our care, and we will not snuff it out.
Yeah. Well, and that was even, like anybody who knows anything about you would not have thought this, but when you use just the word healthcare, a lot of people would assume very inaccurately so that like, oh, that scenario, an issue with the child would count as healthcare. And to be very clear, when you're adding in a say of like, hey, there's a lot of complexity to talk about when we're talking about healthcare, what you mean is like genuine healthcare for mom.
Yeah, the life of the mom.
And particularly, life-threatening healthcare. Yeah. When we're talking about, hey, something's different with baby, that's not healthcare.
Right.
Healthcare leads you to being more healthy. Dying is not healthy.
Yeah.
and which should be obvious, but it just unfortunately is very not obvious in the discourse that takes place.
Yeah.
And so to be it's specific and even dig a little bit more different, a little bit more on the nose, which you just did, right? The nuance really does boil down to when mom's life is at risk.
Yeah, or the baby's life.
Yeah. And everything outside of that might be hard, might be painful. There's lots of nuance to discuss, but there's not nuance as to whether or not it's right.
Yeah, I mean, I just this year, I had someone call me and say, hey, the doctor just told me if we don't abort this baby, my wife's going to die. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And we prayed, and I said, what do you feel like the Lord's telling you? And, he tried to process all of that, and I said to him, without any weirdness at all, I said, I think that, you have the baby aborted and you put that baby in the hands of our merciful God and you save your wife. I mean, to me, it was very clear. And obviously he's got to make the decision, all these things. But for me in that moment, it was, this is what I think I would do.
Yeah.
And by God's grace, he called me an hour later and said, the doctors just totally changed their tune. And now they're saying we can wait a little bit. And they ended up not having to make that decision. And sad to say, the baby did pass away in another couple of weeks, which was heart-wrenching. But the mom was okay. The mom survived and all those things. But that situation does happen.
And that's why, and solidly getting to the political quite comfortably here, because this is where the political is edging into 100% in the church's realm, right? But that's where, why you find a lot of us saying, life of the mother is the one area where the rhetoric of the government has no business makes sense, because there are some decisions that you just can't put a rubric on, and there are some decisions that you genuinely can say, no, it's true. Until I've faced this, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that. And that's one of the and there is such subtlety in each situation that even putting one situation identical to the other on paper doesn't mean the Lord's going to say the same outcome there, and so that's where it is that is a time to butt out, because that is a time for a family to come together with Jesus and with some counsel, and some of that counsel includes the doctors for sure, to then decide, okay, what is the Lord calling us to do? And it's going to be different in different situations. But outside of that exact kind of scenario, there is enough clarity, even unfortunately in the really difficult situations where there's been assault or incest. It's like, that's a very bad, dark, horrible, sad situation, and I would love to just make that situation go away.
Yeah.
But abortion doesn't make that go away.
So it's some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
It feels good actually to be able to kind of unpack both like all the scenarios in my life that I was wrestling with the scriptures with, coming to that message.
Yeah.
Because again, like you had mentioned, it's difficult because in that, 37 minutes or whatever of message, I don't necessarily, not everyone gets to hear all of the stories of how I got to those points. They have to do some of that work on their own. And then to apply those again, there's room for the Holy Spirit. There's room for them. There's room for further discussion. There's room for disagreement.
Yeah.
As they try and now apply and walk out what I sense the Lord was wanting us to chew on together. And that's why you always hope the church is like those Bereans who they hear the word and then they go wrestle it out with their own community. And that's why life groups is such a great thing, because you can go and say, hey, when he said this, I thought, no way, that's not true. And then wrestle that out. And maybe the whole group is like, yeah, I think he was a little off there. Hey, that's okay. I no way am claiming to be perfect, especially, and I know you're the same way when you preach. But the word of God brought forth and brought to bear in our community that we have to wrestle out. That's our goal.
Yeah.
And I think Jude was well represented. I think Jesus was well represented in the message. And I think the response that I've gotten from people is overwhelmingly, it's been very helpful. Even the ones who, I think it was harder for them to hear, but they could say, I appreciate it. And that some in the LGBTQ or that were in that community and have a real kind of censor to say, hey, what you're saying is really, really actually offensive or hard, or it's helpful. I mean, I had some confirmation there that they were saying that was really important and really good and right. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, some I know that are, you know, have friends or themselves are in that kind of illegal, you know, immigrant situation or trying to walk that thing out. And they were telling me this was very, very helpful. I'm glad you shared this, even though it's like, oh, this is hard. And then I haven't really heard that many people. I mean, it's funny. I was thinking like politically, because I was kind of saying, watch the speech politically, but everyone was saying that was helpful. And I think everyone's dealing with that. You know, that's pretty universal right now.
That's one where it's like, it's hard not to fall into it. And so few of us feel good about it, though.
And
so
I had
few
a
of us are
lady,
deceiving.
100%, who has had an abortion in her life. And she's kind of tried to figure out how to wrestle through that. And she was saying it was so helpful. And it encouraged her to go reach out to more ladies in this situation to help them because of what she's lived through in the wake of an abortion and all these things. Yeah. So the Lord was merciful to give me like confirmations in these areas to know I didn't, because I mean, I literally was like, oh Lord, I don't want to just kind of come in with a knife and start cutting, but I want to come in, you know, as a surgeon as best as possible and only cut out the sin and cut out nothing else. But, you know, I only have the ability that I have, and comes up short all the time.
You brought up greed too, but as one of those, I don't know if there's that much pushback there, you know, like, we'll
do some more work on that.
We got a lot of blind spots on greed.
Yeah.
But I think everybody in our culture can admit that greed is bad.
And some people do call it business, you know, like, oh, we're just doing business. I'm just, you know, trying to make a
blind
deal, make a sale.
And
it's like, well, no, if you're cheating, if you're manipulating,
and I think lying. Part of it is greed is so easy for us to look at other people and point the finger.
Mm-hmm. And because you can be broke and still greedy.
Yeah, because and everybody.
It's not just the rich people that are greedy.
Exactly. But then the hard thing is like, looking back on ourselves, because we'll say, "Amen." You know, those greedy rich people. You know, "Amen." Those greedy politicians, and but then it's like Nathan's story to King David, you know, about
you are the man.
Yeah, you are the man who stole.
I guess maybe to wrap this up, my favorite response that I heard from the message was actually from our one and only worship pastor, David McVicker.
Oh yeah?
And he said that, and I always talk to David about testing the spirits. Just like, David, please let there never be strange fire. Like, always help us, you know, fight against strange fire. And I think he's got a real sense of kind of the Lord's heart in that regard. And what he said happened on Sunday was there was a kind of a reigniting in him the fear of the Lord. Like, I don't want to play around with sin. I want to take the Lord seriously in every facet of my life. And I just thought that was a beautiful response. I think that's what Jude is trying to do, is to increase our fear of the Lord. Again, not, oh, God's going to kill me, but I don't want to play around with this because the Lord is so holy. He's so worthy. He's been so good. And I love him so much. I don't even want to play around with this other thing. Just like maybe in a fear of the wife, right? Like, I love my wife so much, and I want her to feel so like filled up and loved that I'm not even going to play around. Like, I'm not even going to even do something that could potentially make her feel some kind of way. Yeah. And so I love David's response in that regard. And I'm praying for more of that for me.
I've got one last little thought on this, which we've chewed at, and I won't even chew on as much now as you and I have outside of it. But the thing that has been messing with me in Jude a little bit is what is our responsibility to deal with this false teaching in churches outside of Living Streams, because the greater body of Christ.
Yeah.
And I feel like one thing that's been really clear that I think we do, and you did really well, and we do intermittently whenever the Lord puts it on our heart in front of us, is to call false teaching. And we're not that angry, grumpy keyboard warrior guy who's there calling every worship song heresy or whatever, you know, but but to say, hey, really carefully, that these are areas where we can talk and disagree and try to figure out and have communion with each other. And over here, this is a lie, and it's a trap, and it's a fiery pit, like Jude is talking about. But what's been getting in me a little bit is like, what's my responsibility with the church down the road that is openly trapping people in lies like this? That is creating a lot of fiery pits for people. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that my calling is to go and start screaming at them and knocking down their door. Mm-hmm. But is there something more like what you're saying the Lord's kind of leading you to do as far as reaching out and loving transgender people, that the Lord is calling us to do as far as engaging with some of these people who are outside of our sphere of authority, but still inside to some extent, or at least on the peripherals of our sphere of responsibility? And that's messing with me. I don't know what that means, but I'm chewing on whether. But at the very least, I think what I could say is, if the Lord were to put in front of me an opportunity to spend some time with a pastor who's leading people into that, I would want to take that opportunity to get to know that person and see if I could earn a voice to say, "Hey, what are you doing? Do you know what you're doing?" I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I have no idea a month now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, what I'll be doing with that. But I can feel the sense of that weird thing that happens when you read the Bible, and the Lord disturbs something that needed to be disturbed. But
I think Jude would like that thought.
Yeah. Well, anyway, any last thoughts for us, David? We got them all. Got all the nuance in the world.
Yeah, that was
on the table.
Hopefully that was helpful for people listening.
Yeah.
To unpack that a lot more, but definitely that was a deep dive right there.
Yeah, is deep dive for a reason. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for hanging with us, for listening to all the nuances in the world, right? And for being with us. Thank you for trusting the Lord in peace, with your family, with your world, with your life.
We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
If anything sparked in your heart or mind you want to share, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot us an email, or if you're at Living Streams, come flag us down on a Sunday morning and let us know what's going on. But we love you guys a lot. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you on Sunday.